you a wrestling fan growing up?
No, I wasn't. Actually, I used to watch wrestling until I was 10 years old. And my youngest sister, I picked her up and gave her a body slam. And that was the end. And my family, my father said, no more wrestling. You can't watch it. And then for a long time, I didn't watch it because I got into the martial arts and everything. And at that time, the wrestlers were really in bad shape. And I said, I don't want to do that, Yeah.
What age did you actually start getting into judo? That's what you studied, right?
Yes, I started when I was 18.
Oh, okay, well. When did you actually realize that you were good at it?
When I went to my first tournament, I actually won. They told me I was a white belt. They said, okay, if you can win 2 matches, we'll promote you to brown belt. Well, I won the whole thing. I beat 5 guys so that day.
Wow.
So I figured I'd be good at it.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in, well, first I was born in Harlem, New York. And then I grew up a few years in the Bronx. And then we moved to St. Albans, Queens, where my mom to this day still lives there. And that's where I grew up at.
Now, you actually got into the Olympics, I believe?
Yes, in 1976 in Montreal, I was a member of the U.S. Olympic team.
How did that come about?
How did it come about? Just hard training. Well, I was 5 times national USAU champ, and I won 2 gold medals in 2 different Pan Am games. And
this is all for judo, right?
This is all for judo. And then they had an Olympic trials out in L.A., and I won that. So I made the team, and then they set me off to Montreal, and I wound up winning the bronze medal there.
How was that like representing your country?
Oh, it was a great feeling. The first time I actually stood on the podium of an international tournament was 1967, the Pan American Games. And I won the gold medal, unbeknownst to everybody, because they picked Doug Rogers, who won a silver medal in the 1964 Olympics. They figured he was going to be the favorite, and I was unknown. And I actually beat him and wound up winning the gold. So
you weren't at the Olympics in '72 then, with the hostages?
No, I actually tried out for the Olympic team, and I blew my knee out, and I was actually in the hospital itself watching it on TV.
Huh. What was the training like for the Olympics?
Oh, very, very difficult, very difficult. I was always famous for training really hard. I trained hard. I enjoyed training. And it was really, really strenuous, and it was difficult. But, you got through it because you wanted to accomplish something, and that was me.
Do you feel that was the competition? How was what other countries did you compete against? Or top countries, and was Russia one of the top countries?
Oh yeah, Japan was the top because I was more or less born in Japan. But the Russians were tough.
The Eastern
German
Bloc
was tough.
Countries, though, they didn't compete in that Olympics, so.
Yes, they did.
In the '76, they did. Okay.
Yeah, in the '76, they did. They competed, and they were all tough. Like all these guys, they just trained judo every day. They didn't have a job, and the government paid them, which we all had to get a job, And so you trained the best that you could.
What kind of career could you have had in judo if you didn't get into wrestling?
Well, if I could have made money, I would have never got involved in wrestling because wrestling was my first love, and it still is. It's still my first love today. And I would have, if I could have made money into it, I would have stayed in the judo. And I always tell people, you hear guys talk about how they got into wrestling because they enjoyed it, they loved it and everything. I tell everybody, I always had a saying, I was in it for the bank book because I had the scrapbook.
How did you get into the business?
Well, I got into the business. I was actually my coach. My judo coach, he wanted me to continue to compete because the time that I retired, I was at the best that I could be. But I was 34 years old, and I was that time I was 33. I was the oldest in the tournament, but there was so much politics involved. They actually tried to stop me from going to the Olympic Games itself, or even getting to the trials, because I was so hated with the politicians. So once I got in there and I beat everybody and I made the trials, I made the team, I just had a bad taste in my mouth. I said, enough's enough already. I'm just going to move on to something else. So he said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I have no idea. He said, okay, why don't you take off a year? Because you trained all these years very hard. And he said, and then I got something in mind for you. So then he came back with this idea a year later. How about going into pro wrestling? And I just busted out laughing. I said, you kidding? I don't want to do that phony baloney stuff, He says, no, we're going to send you off to Japan. He says, over there they train like they did, because I was over there before training for judo in 1970. And he says, they pretty much train like that. And then plus you can still go and work out at the dojos there if you want to. So, okay, that's a good idea. I always liked Japan anyway. So I thought and that's how I got involved.